Today, we're going to talk about toxic work environments, and Kim and I want to share a couple of stories and some experiences for those of you who have been in an environment like that, and some of the things you might be able to consider. So, I'm going to ask Kim to tell a little bit of a story about her experience, and then I'll share a little bit of mine. Kim,
Oh gosh, Alex, I thought I was going to have you start. I didn't have to go
I'm
right
sorry.
into it. No, that's okay. I'll start. Um, I, I think we've all been in toxic work environments, and there are a lot of things that can make an environment toxic. Everybody knows, or maybe doesn't know, but should, about different kinds of harassment. Like we all have to go through training and what is sexual harassment, age harassment, religion harassment, whatever it is, all kinds of harassment and discrimination. And we've all gone through training about that. But what is not included in that, because it's not required by law, is training in just the appropriate way to treat people you work with, to be treated respectfully, all of those things. So I have a story about really being in a toxic culture. And to give a little background, I was working for an organization, loved my job. I was part of the information technology department, but I had a great role. And there was a reorganization, and I was hand selected. I mean, that's the term they use, which is supposed to make you feel really good. I was hand selected to be part of an internal consulting group in the organization that was outside of IT. And it was a small group, 15 people. And when I was offered the opportunity, and I was told kind of primarily most of who was in the group, my gut reaction was that it wasn't people I really wanted to work with. I didn't know all of the people, but I took 24 hours to think about it, because the alternative would have been um, to not have a job. So my position was being eliminated. So I thought about it and thought, well, I have this management consulting background that I bring, and this is an opportunity to get back into consulting, which is something I always loved. And so I said yes. And it didn't take very long at all until I knew that I'd made the wrong move. And the biggest mistake I made was not trusting my instincts. I'll just say, just through the whole thing, I never trusted my instincts. But we had our first sort of team building, team powwow offsite. And we were talking about something that I was very familiar with, and consulting work. And I offered my recommendation for how we might uh, use this methodology, how we might approach something. And it was immediately sort of poo-pooed. Well, no, we're going to do it this way. My initial reaction was, well, that's wrong. That's not the way you would do this if you were a professional consulting firm, but whatever, okay. Um, but the real feeling I had was, wow, my opinion isn't valued. And that was how I started my time with this group, was not feeling valued. I know, they do all those Gallup polls and Press Ganey polls and organizations where they ask you these, I feel valued at work, someone cares about me as a person. And this was the I feel valued at work 0, on a scale of 1 to 10, 0. Um, but it continued. And I guess, do you want me to keep going, Alex, or do you have any
You know,
questions?
I yeah, I think as you're going through the process is kind of your red flags are starting to show, and you're realizing something doesn't quite feel right. What is it that caught your attention about, it didn't feel right, and what in hindsight, what would you have done differently?
Well, I mean, part of the it didn't feel right. There were a couple things that happened that were, it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right. One of them was, there was one of the people in the department who truly was, I would call, the most toxic, although there were several toxic people. Um, but she loved to trash other people, basically. And there was a fellow colleague of mine who we'd both moved into this department together. And it was someone I respected, tremendously talented, smart, and really good at what she does, which is, data and analytics, Six Sigma analytics. Anyway, And this other person came in my office one day going, that woman's crazy. She's just crazy. And I just looked at her and said, she's my very good friend. And I think she's great. And that sort of left it at that. That was my way of saying, I know you like to trash talk people, but just don't do it in my office about people I respect or about anyone for that matter. So that was kind of red flag number two. Red flag number three, there was a younger person in the department, an analyst. People weren't happy with her work. And I offered to coach and mentor. I said, why don't you let me coach and mentor her? Because I felt I could help in the areas where she was weak, which were all around presentation skills and writing. And I felt I could offer something. And when I offered to coach and mentor her, they said, no, she needs to learn by herself, which in my view was saying she needs to fail on her own. And we're just waiting for her to fail so we can get rid of her. That's what I heard, but that's what they said is she needs to learn on her own, no coaching. And then the straw that broke the camel's back. I knew that it wasn't a good home for me. I knew that. I knew that from day one, from the first offsite with, not valuing my input. Came time for performance reviews, and I got the worst performance review I've ever received in my life. Like my eyes were rolling. It was so terrible. No warning. There'd been no dialogue about any of my work up to that point. Improve this, improve that. This isn't what we're looking for. Do something different. I'd been given no direction. And then the performance review was, because we were so matrix, I didn't even really have a boss. I sort of was matrix to, all of the VPs. We were very top heavy, 15 people, 6 VPs, kind of ridiculous. 4 directors. I was one of the directors. So I was kind of given this review, and the 2 people giving me the review, I don't think had ever managed people before. And I had learned the old, sandwich the criticism with something positive. Always lead with positive. We love your energy. You're great with the customers, but here's an area where you can improve. This was, you pretty much stink, it was, here's everything wrong. And I was just in this, do you have anything to say? And I literally said, this is the worst performance review I've ever received. What could I say? I was in shock. Anyway, so I left after the performance review, and that was the day. In hindsight, Alex, because you asked about red flags and learnings, my key learning was, 1, trust your instincts. I never did. There were so many. I just gave you a few. There were so many times I should have just said, this is not for me. I'm leaving. I was afraid to be unemployed. I was afraid that it's harder to get a job when you don't have a job than when you do have a job. Everybody knows that. It's easier to find another job when you're an in-demand commodity because you're already working. But that day, my husband came to pick me up. We carpooled to work because it was 45 minutes to an hour from home. Got to go a little faster in the diamond lane. He usually dropped me off. So when he came to pick me up that day, I said, we have to talk. And can we live on just your income for a while? Because I think I need to quit my job before they fire me. Because I've never been fired from a job. And my husband was very, very supportive. He had been through this before too. He'd been in many toxic work environments where I had said to him, you need to leave. We'll live on my income. Well, you need to leave and go someplace where you'll be valued. So I'd had that conversation in reverse so many times, but my husband was very supportive, but I still wanted to, wait till I had something else. So I literally typed up a resignation letter, undated, folded it nicely in an envelope, and put it underneath, like in my keyboard drawer, under the keyboard, someplace where people wouldn't find it. And it was at the ready. It was like, the next time I get called into the office, because then they started calling me in for things like, you closed the door of your office. You have to keep your door open while you're working. Things like that. I left at 4 o'clock one day because I had a chiropractor appointment. My back was so tweaked from sitting in a chair for 10 hours on Sunday, working on something, for work. And then I kind of this reprimand for leaving at 4, which was astounding to me. As an exempt employee, you're not paid by the hour. But you put in your hours. And if you get there at 7 and you work straight through lunch and you leave at 4, I mean, you're putting in your time. But I got a reprimand for that. And that letter just sat under my drawer for the next time I get called into someone's office. I'm so glad you called me in. Here's my, resignation letter. That was my plan, but it was very toxic. And I know, Alex, it's you've been
I
in
think
talks.
I think what we should do, this should be this will be part one of our episode, and we'll have a part two of this episode because that was a great story, Kim, and I just love the way you set the context. There's a lot more to talk about here, and people are going through this now, and what to do when you're in a situation like this. And I think Kim, you said it well: is trust your gut is the most important thing. Really trust your gut, and it's not worth the sacrifice of your health, your family life, your welfare or just a job when you're in a toxic environment. So let's continue this conversation on a part two.
I think we can, Alex, and I look forward to hearing your story, and we can dive a little deeper into what's a toxic work environment, when to recognize it, and what to do. So thanks for listening, everyone, and follow us on Spotify. Oops.